All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're going to completely reframe how you think about building wealth. We're stepping away from the complex spreadsheets and the hard math, and we're zooming in on something much more fascinating: human behavior. Because as you're about to see, getting wealthy actually has surprisingly little to do with how smart you are and absolutely everything to do with how you act. So let's kick things off with Section 1, the paradox of wealth. We're going to start by dismantling the single biggest myth in finance. And to do that, consider this mystery. Meet Ronald Read. For 17 years, this guy swept floors at a department store. Then, for another 25 years, he repaired cars at a local gas station. He lived in a totally modest house he bought for $12,000, and his biggest hobby? Chopping firewood. Yet, when he passed away in 2014 at the age of 92, he left behind an $8 million fortune. Seriously, he didn't win the lottery, he didn't inherit a single dime, and no, he wasn't secretly a cartel boss. So how on earth did a humble janitor amass that kind of wealth? Well, look at the stark contrast here between Ronald Read, a total amateur, and a guy named Richard Fiscone. Now, Fiscone was a Harvard-educated MBA, a high-flying executive at Merrill Lynch, and a widely recognized financial genius who even retired in his 40s. He borrowed heavily to expand an 1,800-square-meter mansion with 11 bathrooms and 2 pools. But when the 2008 financial crisis hit, all that debt completely crushed him. Just months before our humble janitor died with $8 million in the bank, this financial genius had his mansion foreclosed on and declared bankruptcy. I mean, think about how genuinely insane that is. Finance is literally the only field on planet Earth where this happens. You would never, ever see a janitor outperform a Harvard-trained surgeon in an operating room, right? You never see an amateur design a more structurally sound skyscraper than a top-tier architect. Yet somehow, in investing, a guy with no education, no background, and zero connections completely obliterated a seasoned Wall Street executive. So what's the ultimate takeaway here? It's that acquiring wealth is not a hard math science. It's actually a soft skill. It is entirely about your psychological state and your behavioral habits. Your fancy degree or your ability to calculate complex formulas, they simply don't matter if you can't control your ego or your fears. If you've ever seen the movie Kung Fu Panda, you might remember that the dad's famous noodle soup had no magical, mystical recipe. It was just good soup. Well, Ronald Read's wealth is exactly the same. There is no secret ingredient. He just lived below his means, put his savings into solid blue-chip companies, and then he waited. He just waited for decades, letting the absolute magic of compounding do the heavy lifting. Which brings us nicely to Section 2, Warren Buffett's true secret. Let's examine the most famous investor in history, because even with the all-time greats, we often completely misunderstand what actually made them rich. And this brings us to a massive reality check about Warren Buffett. Out of his staggering $142 billion net worth, a jaw-dropping 99.8% of it was accumulated after his 50th birthday. Actually, almost 98% came after he turned 60. Yes, Buffett is a phenomenal stock picker, absolutely. But his ultimate secret weapon isn't just his return rate. His secret weapon is time. He started investing at age 10, and, well, he essentially never stopped. Let's play a game and imagine an alternate Earth Buffett. Imagine he was just a bit more normal. Say he spends his 20s exploring the world, starts investing at age 30 with $30,000, and sure, he still achieves that miraculous 22% annual return, but like a normal person, he decides to retire at age 60 to go play golf and spend time with his grandkids. If he did that, what would his net worth be today? Not $142 billion. It would be $11.65 million. Guys, that is a staggering 99.99% drop in wealth. Without those extra decades of waiting, his fortune virtually disappears. It proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that time is the ultimate multiplier. Let's move to Section 3, the math genius contrast. To really hammer home the power of time, let's compare Buffett to the legendary mathematician Jim Simons. Simons ran the Medallion Fund and achieved a mind-blowing 66% annual return over 30 years. I mean, he literally tripled Buffett's return rate. Yet, when Simons passed away, his net worth was around $30 billion, which is only a fraction of Buffett's. Why? Simply because Simons didn't find his investing stride until he was 50 years old. He had less than half the compounding time that Buffett had. So, let's lean into a pretty crazy hypothetical here. What if Jim Simons had Buffett's timeline? What if Simons had invested for 80 straight years at his crazy 66% return rate, starting with just $30,000? What would his net worth be? Hold on to your hats. The number is $121 septillion. That is 121 followed by 24 zeros. It's a number so insanely large that our human brains literally short circuit trying to comprehend the math. It basically ceases to have any practical meaning in finance. To put that astronomical scale in perspective, I want you to imagine counting every single grain of sand on the entire planet. Every beach, every ocean floor, every single desert. If every single grain of sand cost exactly $1, Jim Simon's $121 septillion could buy you 1,600 entire Earths made of sand. Let that sink in. That is the true, terrifying power of compounding. All right, Section 4. Overcoming our primal brains. Because, look, if the math is this obvious and compounding is really this powerful, why do we all struggle so much to actually sit back and do it? Well, the root of the problem is that humans are fundamentally hardwired to think in straight lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But compounding works exponentially. It's 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. The explosive curve of exponential growth just feels deeply counterintuitive to us. We literally aren't built to understand it naturally. And hey, even the greatest tech geniuses fall into this trap. Back in 2004, when Gmail launched with 1 gigabyte of storage, Bill Gates famously scoffed at it, calling it a total gimmick. He couldn't fathom why anyone would ever need a whole gigabyte of email storage. He failed to grasp the exponential growth of technology and our data needs. And honestly, if Bill Gates can underestimate exponential growth, so can we when it comes to our money. It all comes down to our evolutionary biology. As humans, our brains evolved in the primitive forest, right? Our ancestors survived by getting immediate feedback. You hunt, you eat. You see a predator, you run. We are biologically wired to crave those immediate reactions. So waiting 30 or 40 years for a financial payoff, that feels unnatural, boring, and even agonizing to our primal instincts. And this is exactly why so many retail investors sabotage themselves. They get into day trading, buying today, selling tomorrow, constantly refreshing their stock charts. It gives them this illusion of control. It feeds that primitive craving for immediate feedback and action. But they're completely confusing the adrenaline rush of doing something with actually making smart financial progress. At the end of the day, people mostly don't lose to the market, they lose to their own boredom and that irresistible urge to just tinker. Honestly, if there were a truly honest book about investing, it wouldn't be about complex chart analysis or timing economic cycles, because the best path forward isn't chasing the absolute highest, riskiest return. It's about finding a decent, reliable return that you can peacefully stick with for the long haul. The ultimate investment book would simply be titled Buy, Disconnect, and Wait. Which brings us to the ultimate question for you. We've just seen that wealth isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the most patient. So, will you surrender the illusion of short-term control and let time do the heavy lifting? Or will you, like so many others, lose the game simply because you couldn't handle the boredom? Think about it. See you in the next explainer.